Hey, Larry here. Acts 29 today, coming to you from Sunny World headquarters in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I'd like to welcome all the viewers in Thailand and around the world to this edition. Well, next, we're going to go from Zambia, where there were a lot of things that happened, and it was an amazing time in Zambia. And now we're going to move on to Kenya. My first trip to Kenya, Africa was a real education, and after some 5 or 6 trips there, I would really have an education in a lot of things that I would just have soon not to have been educated in. Some, but not all African countries can be very difficult to work in. Different cultures have very different ways of doing things than the West. For example, in the West, what we would call lying in Kenya is just normal way of life. And if you've ever been to some of these countries, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Not everyone is like that, but it's something to be aware of if you ever go there. So I had a pastor friend in Utah, and there was a guy there from Kenya at the church one day when I was there. And he said that he was an apostle and that he was pastoring like 50 churches there in Kenya. So, of course, this man invited me to come and do a big pastors conference in Nairobi. So I said, okay, I'll come. And I just want to tell you that when you meet foreigners from these other countries or you're in those countries, they will all invite you to come and speak. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, they will invite you to come. Always invite you to come. So I got to Nairobi and I found out very quickly that this man, he didn't have any churches. He didn't have one church, let alone 50. But what he was doing was he was using us as a way to get a conference going by having a guest speaker from America, me. Well, there was another man working with him that seemed to be more on the up and up, so we ended up working with him more. But we did do the conference, and it ended up being in a place that was halfway between Nairobi and Mombasa over on the coast, which was about a 3-hour drive on the most dangerous road in Kenya. The saying on that road is this road was the quickest way to heaven. Then it was made known to us that the car we would need to rent to get there and the food for all the people attending the 4 days of services would have to be paid by us. Of course, none of this was ever made known before the trip. So here's a mission tip. You will always be invited to come and minister in another country because you will be expected to pay for everything while you're there. Fortunately, on this particular trip, my mother had given me an extra $1,000 for this trip because she was led by the Spirit. I wasn't sure why we had the extra money, but now I knew. And you know, I wasn't real happy with this news, but I didn't want all the people that were coming to the conference not to get what God wanted them to receive. So we had the extra money and we paid for everything. The conference was great. A lot of people got filled with the Holy Spirit and learned about praying in tongues for edification, the revelation gift. And on the way back, I was driving along this road about 50 miles an hour. There was 5 of us in this car, and I was driving, when a big truck came around a corner, taking up half of my lane. So I swerved to the left, just missing the truck. But my front wheel dropped off the pavement, and it was a 5 or 6 inch drop off there. So when I tried getting it back on the road, it wouldn't come back. So I turned the wheel a little further to the right. Then all of a sudden it jumped back up on the road, went into the other lane. Fortunately, no one was coming, but I couldn't keep it on the road. So we went off the road at about 50 miles an hour into a big patch of thistle bushes. The car came down very softly, and right next to this bushes there was a dirt road that ran alongside the main road. I put the car in four-wheel drive, drove out of the bushes onto the dirt road, then we all got out of the car. We were very shaken and thanked God for his mercy in sparing our lives. There were two guys on bicycles close by that watched the whole thing, and one of them told us, "God saved you today." And then he said they call this stretch of road here the place that demons kill people. And he told us of many accidents, bus accidents there that had killed many, many people. Well, we were, of course, very thankful. And the amazing thing is that this rental car didn't have a scratch on it. But before we took it back, we went through a car wash and made it look like brand new. Took it back. The guy said, "You have any problems with the car?" I said, "Nope." Ran like a charm. They said, "Well, it sure looks like you took good care of it." So now we were back in Nairobi, and there were 5 or 6 other cities around that we were scheduled to have meetings in also. Well, as we traveled around, the people on the team of Africans became more and more angry with the man who was lying to him about a lot of stuff, and so they were beginning to leave the team. I had a dream one night, and I saw the man that was lying to all of us about stuff. I saw him in his dream riding a bicycle on a tightrope wire. He was also balancing stuff with both hands, and on the top of his head, there were many things going on at the same time for this man. He was working hard day and night to keep everything from falling. Then all of a sudden, the wire broke, and he and everything that he was trying to keep in balance fell to the ground. I knew then that this whole thing was coming to an end, and a few days later, everyone but the other man that we trusted more had left him. We only had a few more meetings at that time, and so we completed them, and even with all the problems, many people were blessed and filled with the Spirit, received the prayer language, encouraged and strengthened in the faith. One day as we were traveling through a small city in some traffic, the car going the other way was right beside our car, and the police were right behind them. Turns out the car was stolen, and the police started to shoot out the back window. And the glass was blowing over coming into our car as I had my window down. So I had my arm out the window, they were shooting, all this glass came over and cut my arm up a little bit. There's many carjackings there, and the police don't ask questions, they just shoot them. So at the end of the trip, I talked to the man that had lied so much to us about everything, and I said, "You know what?" I said, we just can't work with you any longer." He was amazed and said that he had not lied to anyone about anything. It just seemed like normal behavior for him. At one meeting, after many had been baptized in the Holy Spirit and received their prayer language, they just stayed around praising God for a long time. The next night, just before the meeting was going to start, a man came up to me with his wife and said, "What happened to my wife last night?" "I have a brand new wife. She is a completely different woman than when she left." Well, his wife was standing behind him, still glowing from what she had experienced the night before, and so I told him about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. These people's lives were so radically changed by the infilling of the Holy Spirit and receiving their prayer language. So we started to work with this man that was on the trip that we felt like we could trust, and we'll just call him Mr. Z for the story's sake. These are just some pictures from Mombasa. This is one of the guys that was at the conference. That's not not Mr. Z. And this was a couple of other pastors there that we were working with. And this was the beautiful ocean there in Mombasa. So we started working with this other guy, and I had made several trips there because there were several churches there that we were working with, and so I had made several trips there, and they were doing evangelistic meetings in Mombasa, which is almost 100% Muslim. But we were at meetings outdoors, public evangelistic meetings where the team was preaching and teaching and casting out demons right in the public places with Muslims walking by on every side. Reminded me of the book of Acts, but no one bothered us or said anything to us as we had these meetings. And these African ministers were fearless and had no choice. I had no choice but to be fearless also. So at one point, we were going to help Mr. Z, and he wanted to start a pharmacy there to, raise money for these churches. So we helped him out, and here's a real lesson here. Okay, we helped him out, and then we were getting reports from him and stuff, but he never really sent us receipts and stuff like that. So, we began to wonder, well, what's going on here, And then one day, his wife called me, and no, she emailed me and broke my heart because she said that Mr. Z had been hanging out in Mombasa with a prostitute and bought her a small piece of land and a cow with the money we'd given him for the pharmacy. Well, I found out from the churches there that it was true. I called Mr. Z, and he said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, we can work this out, but you don't want to be, stealing money from God and doing this kind of stuff. It's not good. Well, he continued to deny it, and some months later, a friend of mine from there called me and said Mr. Z was in the hospital with a liver problem. And then he called me a few days later and he said Mr. Z had passed away. And the prostitute lady had been by his side. And that he had tried to tell my friend something to tell me, but he was too weak to tell me. And so they got him a piece of paper. He was going to write something on the paper to tell me, but he was too weak to write. And he passed away. And so, I was just so bummed out that, this happened. But, it's the lesson of missions that you have got to be careful. You've got to, even the people that seem so trustworthy and everything, if they get too much, especially money, if they get too much money at once, it's such a big temptation for them because they've never had anything like that. And I've seen it ruin ministry after ministry and cause all kinds of problems. And it was all over money. So all I can tell you is be careful in that regard. And in the next video, we will continue on the journey.